The enormous obsidian doors of the Thraxian throne room slammed shut behind Kieran Vasily, the echo reverberating through the cavernous chamber. 6 royal guards flanked him, their scaled skin gleaming under the crimson light of twin moons filtering through crystalline skylights. Their grip on his arms would leave bruises, assuming he lived long enough for bruises to form. Before him, lounging on a throne carved from a single massive piece of black stone, Queen Ixora watched with predatory amber eyes. Her exoskeleton shimmered with iridescent patterns that shifted with her breathing, crown-like projections framing her elongated head. Despite never having seen her species before today, Kieran recognized power when he saw it. "So this is Earth's idea of a diplomat." Her voice carried the hint of a melodic chirp beneath its imperious tone. "I expected something more impressive." Laughter rippled through the court. Ministers, nobles, and warriors gathered to witness the humiliation of the human interloper. The Interstellar Diplomatic Corps had warned him the Thraxian Empire considered humans fragile curiosities at best, vermin at worst. They'd never agreed to formal relations with Earth. "Your Majesty," Kieran began, keeping his voice steady despite the circumstances, "my presence here was meant as a gesture of—" "Silence!" Queen Ixora rose, her full height nearly 7 feet, armored carapace gleaming. "Your ship violated our territorial boundaries. Your diplomatic mission was not invited nor welcomed, and now you will serve as entertainment before your execution." Kieran maintained his composure. 15 years in special operations before joining the diplomatic corps had taught him to assess threats calmly. 3 elite guards stepped forward, distinguishable by the red markings on their exoskeletons. Each carried ceremonial blades that seemed designed more for slow dismemberment than efficient killing. "These are my finest razor-claw guards," the Queen announced. "They will demonstrate why the Thraxian Empire has never been conquered." The chamber was sparsely furnished. The throne, several stone benches for courtiers, decorative spears mounted on walls, and a large basin of what appeared to be ritual water. Kieran noted every detail, every potential resource. "Do you wish to beg for mercy, human?" the Queen asked, retaking her throne. "It would amuse us." Kieran met her gaze. "I prefer to reserve judgment on your hospitality, Your Majesty." Something flickered in her compound eyes, surprise, perhaps. She hadn't expected dignity. "Begin," she commanded with a dismissive wave. The guards circled him, chittering among themselves in their native language. The court cheered, some placing wagers on how quickly he would die. Kieran centered his breathing, waited. The first guard lunged from behind. Kieran pivoted at the last moment, using the guard's momentum to send him crashing into the ritual basin. Water splashed across the polished stone floor. The second attacked immediately, blade slashing toward Kieran's throat. He dropped, sweeping the guard's legs, a move that shouldn't have worked against a being with an exoskeleton. But Kieran had noticed the joint structure, the Thraxian equivalent of knees. The guard toppled, and Kieran rolled away from the third attacker. Now mobile, Kieran sprinted toward the wall. The court laughed, thinking him cornered. He leapt, grabbed one of the ceremonial spears, and wrenched it free. As he turned, the first guard was charging again. Kieran didn't aim for the exoskeleton, useless against such armor. Instead, he targeted the unprotected sensory organs at the neck juncture, driving the spear with precision. The guard collapsed, twitching. The second guard approached more cautiously. Kieran feinted left, then smashed the water-slicked floor with the spear's butt. A fragment of stone broke loose, jagged, hand-sized. He threw it with deadly accuracy at the guard's compound eye. The Thraxian shrieked, clutching at its face. The third guard, witnessing his compatriot's fall, attacked with fury. Kieran dodged the first swing, countered the second by catching the guard's arm at its joint, and used the momentum to flip the much heavier being over his shoulder. The guard crashed onto his back, and Kieran immediately drove his knee into the vulnerable throat junction, pressing until the Thraxian stopped struggling. Silence descended. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. Kieran stood slowly, breathing controlled, facing the throne. Blood, a viscous blue fluid, stained his standard-issue diplomatic uniform. One guard unconscious, one blinded, one immobilized. None dead, which had been deliberate. Killing would have made this political. Incapacitation made it a statement. The Queen rose from her throne, moving with predatory grace until she stood before him. The court remained frozen in shock. "You are not what you appear to be, human," she said, her voice lower, private. Few of us are, Your Majesty. Kieran maintained eye contact, refusing to show submission despite being unarmed and surrounded. Queen Ixora circled him slowly, examining. The diplomatic corps of Earth sends warriors disguised as peace speakers. Interesting strategy. Sometimes understanding between worlds requires unconventional approaches. A sound emerged from the Queen, a chittering that Kieran's translator couldn't process. It took him a moment to realize it was laughter. Take him to the East Wing, she commanded the remaining guards. Clean quarters, not the cells. She leaned closer to Kieran, her scent reminiscent of cinnamon and ozone. We will speak again, diplomat. I find myself curious. As guards escorted him out, Kieran caught her watching him, her posture no longer bored but attentive. In her alien features, he recognized something universal, reassessment, and beneath that, something more dangerous. Interest. 3 days had passed since Kieran's unexpected victory in the throne room. His clean quarters were luxurious by human standards, a spacious chamber with views of the twin moons and strange, bioluminescent flora that illuminated the Thraxian palace gardens. Still, the locked door reminded him he remained a prisoner, albeit a privileged one. When the door finally opened, 2 royal attendants entered, smaller Thraxians with delicate limbs and pale exoskeletons. They carried folded garments of iridescent fabric. The Queen requests your presence, one announced, placing the clothes on a stone bench. You will dress appropriately. The garments were clearly tailored for human physiology, but incorporated Thraxian design elements. High collar, asymmetrical closure, and material that shifted colors with movement. Kieran changed quickly, noting how the fabric moved like liquid metal against his skin. The attendants led him through labyrinthine corridors, adorned with holographic murals depicting Thraxian military conquests. They arrived at an enclosed garden where Queen Ixora waited beside a reflecting pool filled with bioluminescent creatures that pulsed with blue-green light. She wore ceremonial armor that accentuated her powerful form, though Kieran noticed it was lighter than her throne room attire, more decorative than functional. Her crown-like projections were adorned with precious metals that caught the light as she turned toward him. Leave us, she commanded the attendants, who retreated with deep bows. When they were alone, Ixora gestured to a stone bench. Sit, diplomat, your legs are less efficient supports than ours. Kieran sat, maintaining proper posture. I appreciate the accommodation, Your Majesty. Your display in the throne room has caused considerable disruption among my court. She remained standing, moving with that predatory grace around the pool. The Razorclaw guards you defeated have requested ritual suicide to atone for their failure. I hope you denied their request. They fought with honor. Ixora's compound eyes fixed on him. I did deny them, though not for the reason you suggest. Their failure provides a valuable lesson in underestimating opponents. She paused. A lesson I myself have learned. Kieran inclined his head. Assessments based on incomplete data are rarely accurate, Your Majesty. Indeed, she finally sat opposite him. Which is why you are here instead of in execution chambers. I require complete data. I'm honored to provide cultural exchange. Not cultural, her voice lowered. Personal, you specifically intrigue me. Your physical capabilities exceed our intelligence on humans. Explain. Kieran considered his response carefully. Not all humans share the same capabilities, just as I imagine not all Thraxians are identical. I've had specialized training. Combat training disguised as diplomacy. Your species practices deception. Preparedness, Kieran corrected, and adaptation, qualities I suspect Your Majesty values as well. Ixora made that untranslatable chittering sound again, her version of laughter. Boldly spoken, most beings tremble before me. Fear inhibits communication. I came to communicate. Even as our prisoner. Especially then, Kieran leaned forward slightly. Circumstances change, opportunities arise. The Queen's antennae twitched, a subtle tell he was beginning to recognize as interest. You still consider yourself a diplomat even now. Every interaction between us is diplomacy, Your Majesty, including this one. Ixora rose and approached him, her towering form casting a shadow. To remain seated was to show vulnerability, but Kieran held his position, looking up at her without flinching. "Stand," she commanded. He complied, now only inches from her. Up close, her exoskeleton revealed intricate patterns that seemed both biological and deliberate, like living art. "Humans are physically weaker than Thraxians," she observed, circling him. "Yet you defeated 3 elite guards. Show me how." "That would require me to touch your majesty. I understand that might be considered an offense." "I grant permission, for scientific purposes." Kieran nodded. "The key is understanding joint mechanics. May I demonstrate?" When she agreed, he slowly positioned himself behind her, maintaining respectful distance while explaining. "Thraxian joints are remarkably similar to human pressure points. Here," he indicated without touching, "and here, even superior strength has vulnerabilities." She turned suddenly, faster than he anticipated, her face close to his. "And your vulnerabilities, diplomat, what are they?" "That would be poor negotiating strategy to reveal, Your Majesty." Her mandibles shifted in what might have been a smile. "Yet you revealed our weaknesses." "Only those already demonstrated, a gesture of trust." Something changed in her posture, a subtle softening. "You are a curious specimen, Kieran Vasily." It was the first time she had used his name. "Join me for the evening meal," she continued. "My attendants will collect you. We have much to discuss." As Kieran was escorted back to his chambers, he caught her watching his departure with an intensity that wasn't there before. The game had changed. He was no longer merely a prisoner or curiosity. He represented possibility. That night, dining in the Queen's private chambers, their conversation ranged from interstellar politics to philosophy. When their hands accidentally touched, reaching for the same ceremonial cup, neither pulled away immediately. The contact lingered, alien skin against human, warm against cool. "Your species' temperature," Ixora commented, her voice softer than he'd heard before. "It's pleasant." Kieran met her gaze. "Adaptation creates unexpected compatibilities, Your Majesty." For the first time since his capture, Kieran saw beyond the fearsome Thraxian queen to the intelligent being beneath the crown. And in her compound eyes, he recognized something unexpected, not just curiosity, but connection. 2 weeks into his stay, Kieran found himself with unprecedented freedom within the palace. Officially designated as a cultural advisor to the queen, he now moved through the royal complex with an escort of just 1 guard, a younger Thraxian named Krell who seemed more curious than suspicious of the human. "The queen attends the Council of Elders today," Krell informed him as they walked through the botanical gardens where alien flora reached toward the crimson sky. "She has instructed me to show you the archives until her return." The Thraxian archives were housed in a massive crystalline dome. Inside, data streams flowed through transparent conduits, and ancient artifacts from conquered worlds were displayed in gravitational suspension fields. Kieran moved reverently among the exhibits, aware of the rare privilege he'd been granted. "Your planet," Krell indicated a holographic display of Earth. "The Queen has been studying it extensively." Kieran examined the detailed model. "She's thorough in her research." "The Queen had never shown interest in Earth before your arrival," Krell added, mandibles clicking in what Kieran had learned was thoughtfulness. "Now she requests daily updates on human culture, physiology, history." Before Kieran could respond, a low-toned resonance filled the chamber, the Thraxian equivalent of an alarm. Krell's posture stiffened. "What's happening?" Kieran asked. "Security breach in the council chambers," Krell answered, already moving toward the exit. "I must return you to your quarters immediately." But Kieran was already running in the opposite direction. "The Queen is in the council chamber." "Stop, you are not authorized," Krell called after him. Kieran ignored the command, navigating the corridors from memory. He reached the council wing to find chaos, guards rushing toward the main chamber, the distinctive sound of energy weapons discharging within. Without hesitation, he slipped past the distracted guards and entered through a service corridor he'd mentally mapped during previous visits. Inside, he assessed the situation instantly. 3 assassins with modified pulse weapons had the council members cornered. Queen Ixora stood defiant despite an energy burn across her shoulder carapace, her royal guards dead around her. One assassin noticed Kieran and turned to fire. Kieran dropped and rolled, grabbing a ceremonial staff from a fallen guard. With a practiced motion, he hurled it javelin style, piercing the assassin's weapon hand. The distraction gave Ixora the opening she needed. She launched herself at another attacker with shocking speed, her natural claws slicing through their armor. Kieran engaged the third assassin in close combat, evading energy blasts while working his way closer. When in range, he executed a precise strike to the attacker's sensory cluster, followed by disabling blows to the joint systems he'd come to understand so well. Together, he and Ixora subdued the assassins. As reinforcements flooded the chamber, she approached him, ichor seeping from her wounded shoulder. "You disobeyed orders to remain in the archives," she said, her voice carrying an unexpected note. "I did, Your Majesty." "Why?" Kieran met her gaze. Some priorities transcend protocol. She studied him, then turned to the guards. "Escort the council members to safety. I will retire to my chambers with my cultural advisor to discuss this breach." In her private chambers, a medical attendant treated the Queen's injury while Kieran waited on the balcony, watching the moons rise over the crystalline spires of the capital city. When Ixora joined him, she wore a simpler garment that left her arms bare, the iridescent patterns on her exoskeleton fully visible. "The assassins were from the militant faction," she explained, standing beside him at the railing. "They believe my interest in diplomatic relations with other species weakens our empire." "They're wrong," Kieran said simply. "Adaptation strengthens." "A very human perspective," she turned to face him. "Yet today, that perspective saved my life." "As did your combat skills. You fight impressively for royalty." Her mandibles clicked in amusement. "Did you think I achieved my position through bloodline alone? Thraxian queens must prove their strength to rule. We have more in common than either of our species would admit." She stepped closer. Perhaps exploration of these commonalities should be more thorough. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Kieran felt a pull toward her that defied reason or protocol, a connection transcending their biological differences. "I've studied human physiology," she continued, her voice lower. "Your response indicators suggest mutual interest." Kieran smiled at her scientific approach to attraction. "Your assessment is accurate, Your Majesty." "Ixora," she corrected. "When we are alone, use my name." "Ixora," he repeated, the alien syllables feeling right on his tongue. She raised a four-fingered hand to his face, the touch cool against his skin. "Your warmth fascinates me." Kieran covered her hand with his own. "Temperature is only the beginning of our differences and similarities." When she leaned down, he met her halfway. The kiss, adapted to their different physiologies, was gentle at first, exploratory. Her exoskeleton was smoother than it appeared, with surprising sensitivity at the seams. His hands found these places instinctively, drawing a melodic trill from her throat. "Cultural exchange," she murmured against his neck, "has unexpected benefits." Their bodies found harmony despite their differences, her strength tempered by newfound gentleness, his adaptability finding pathways of pleasure between them. In the shadow of two moons, human and Thraxian discovered intimate communication beyond words or translation. Afterward, lying among silken cushions, her exoskeleton reflecting moonlight in iridescent patterns, Ixora traced the battle scars on Kieran's shoulder. "Your diplomatic skills are unconventional," she said, "but effective." Kieran smiled, running his fingers along the edge of her crown-like projections. "I could say the same of your hospitality." Her compound eyes held his gaze. "This changes everything." "Or perhaps," Kieran suggested, pulling her closer, "it simply reveals what was possible all along." As dawn approached, they both knew they had crossed a threshold from which neither could retreat. Whatever came next would reshape not just their lives, but potentially the relationship between their species. The political implications were dangerous, the personal ones more so. Yet in the warm darkness, such concerns felt distant compared to the simple miracle of connection across the stars. A month into what had become the most unorthodox diplomatic mission in Earth's history, Kieran received the message he'd been dreading. The communication came through official channels. Earth wanted their diplomat returned immediately. "Your government suggests I've been holding you against your will," Ixora said, her voice carefully neutral as they reviewed the transmission in her private study. No longer was he summoned to her presence. They moved through palace life in parallel, their paths intersecting with increasing frequency and duration. Standard diplomatic procedure when contact is limited, Kieran explained, though they both understood the deeper implications. They have no knowledge of recent developments. Ixora's antennae twitched, a sign of agitation she rarely displayed publicly. And if they did? The question hung between them. Their relationship existed in a protected bubble within the palace walls, where Ixora's authority was absolute. Beyond those walls lay interstellar politics neither was naive enough to ignore. My mission was to establish diplomatic relations with the Thraxian Empire, Kieran said carefully. In that regard, I've been successful beyond expectations. A diplomatic answer. She moved to the crystalline window overlooking the capital city, her reflection fragmenting through the mineral panes. But not a complete one. Kieran joined her close enough that their arms touched, human skin against iridescent exoskeleton, a contrast that had become familiar, cherished. The complete answer is more complex. My loyalty to Earth remains, as does my commitment to what we've built. What we've built remains unnamed, she observed, perhaps deliberately so. Before he could respond, the study door chimed. Ixora moved away from him with practiced swiftness as her senior advisor Thrax entered. The older Thraxian's compound eyes swept between them, missing nothing. The Royal Council awaits, Your Majesty, Thrax announced, his tone conveying more than the words. The matter is urgent. Kieran recognized the subtle shift in Ixora's posture, the queen reasserting herself over the woman he'd come to know in private moments. I will attend them shortly. When they were alone again, she turned to Kieran. The Council grows increasingly concerned about your presence and influence. Thrax leads those who believe I've been compromised. Have you? Kieran asked softly. Her mandibles clicked once, a sound he'd learned signified deep emotion. Irreversibly, she moved toward the door. Attend the Council session from the observation gallery. What transpires will concern you directly. The Royal Council chamber was an imposing amphitheater where 12 elder Thraxians sat in tiered stone seats surrounding the Queen's central dais. From the shadowed observation gallery, Kieran watched as Ixora entered, her ceremonial armor gleaming under crystalline lights. Your Majesty, Thrax began without preamble, we have received intelligence that the human diplomatic vessel approaches our system again. They demand the return of their representative. A demand implies authority they do not possess in our territory, Ixora responded coolly. Another counselor rose. The human's continued presence represents an unprecedented security risk, after the assassination attempt. Which the human helped thwart, Ixora interrupted. Or orchestrated, Thrax countered, to gain your confidence. Our sources indicate this diplomat has extensive military training. His assignment here may have ulterior motives. Kieran tensed. Someone had accessed his classified service record, information even Ixora didn't possess. What do you propose, Counselor? The Queen asked, her voice dangerously calm. Return him to his people immediately. Thrax's mandibles clicked sharply. And should you refuse, the Council must consider whether your judgment remains unclouded. The chamber fell silent. What Thrax suggested bordered on treason, questioning the Queen's fitness to rule. Ixora's response would define everything that followed. My judgment has never been clearer, she said, rising to her full height. The human stays until I determine otherwise. This council serves at my pleasure, a fact some appear to have forgotten. As she swept from the chamber, Kieran retreated from the gallery, understanding the gravity of what had just occurred. She had defended him at great political cost. That night in her private chambers, their lovemaking carried an edge of desperate intensity. Her exoskeleton radiated heat, a rare physiological response signifying extreme emotional states in Thraxians. The Council will move against you, he whispered afterward, tracing the luminescent patterns along her shoulder. They have already begun, she confirmed. Thrax has contacted your Earth vessel directly, offering to return you in exchange for technology concessions. Kieran sat up. How do you know this? I have my loyalists, her compound eyes reflected the moonlight, but they grow fewer each day. Then let me return to my ship, he suggested, though the words tasted bitter. I can negotiate from there, establish formal diplomatic ties that legitimize our relationship. You believe your government would accept such an arrangement? Her tone held skepticism. A relationship between their representative and an alien ruler. Earth has faced stranger diplomatic scenarios. He took her hand, marveling still at how natural it felt. But first, we must secure your position here. Ixora's antennae flattened, a sign of resolute decision. There is another way. Ancient Thraxian tradition allows for declaration of intent, a formal announcement of royal bonding. Once declared, challenging the queen's choice becomes sacrilege. Kieran understood the magnitude of what she proposed. You would bind yourself to an alien for political security. I would acknowledge publicly what already exists privately. Her voice softened. Unless the prospect disturbs you. His answer was to pull her closer, their bodies finding familiar harmony. I crossed galaxies to find you. A little political turbulence won't change that. Dawn brought chaos. Kieran woke to alarms and the sounds of struggle outside the royal chambers. He reached for Ixora but found her side of the bed empty, the sheets cool. The doors burst open. 3 royal guards entered, led by Krell, whose posture conveyed urgency rather than threat. You must come quickly, the young guard urged. The Queen. Kieran was already moving, pulling on clothes as Krell explained. Thrax had made his move, accusing the Queen of being mentally compromised by alien influence. He had attempted to inject her with a paralytic neurotoxin during an emergency council session. They reached the council chamber to find it in disarray. Ixora stood at the center, bleeding from a shoulder wound but very much in control. At her feet, Thrax lay immobilized by his own toxin. When she saw Kieran, something shifted in her posture, relief followed by determination. Perfect timing, Ambassador, she said formally, for the benefit of the stunned council members. Witness the consequences of treason against the crown and against our future alliance with Earth. She moved to Kieran's side, taking his hand publicly for the first time. The gesture sent shocked whispers through the assembled Thraxians. I declare intent, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of ancient tradition. This human, Kieran Vasily of Earth, stands as my chosen consort. Our union will forge new bonds between our worlds, bonds that begin with diplomatic recognition and end with shared destiny. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Kieran squeezed her hand, understanding that with those words everything had changed. Their private connection had just become the most public and controversial diplomatic arrangement in galactic history. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Ixora's compound eyes met his with unwavering resolve. Adaptation strengthens, does it not? Around them, the future of 2 worlds began to take tumultuous shape. The Earth diplomatic vessel Concordia hung in orbit above the Thraxian homeworld, its sleek design contrasting with the crystalline Thraxian defense platforms surrounding it. On the palace's highest spire, Kieran stood before a communication array, facing the stern expressions of the interstellar diplomatic corps' highest officials. Ambassador Vasily, Admiral Helena Frost began, her holographic image flickering slightly. Your situation is unprecedented. Some would call it a dereliction of duty. Others might call it the most successful first contact in human history, Kieran countered. The Thraxian Empire has agreed to formal diplomatic relations, trade negotiations, and technological exchange. All objectives of my mission have been exceeded. By becoming romantically involved with an alien monarch, another official scoffed. This goes beyond diplomatic protocol. With respect, Kieran said, maintaining his composure, the history of diplomacy is filled with strategic unions. This one happens to be sincere as well as advantageous. Admiral Frost leaned forward. The IDC did not authorize you to negotiate with your heart, Ambassador. No, he acknowledged. You authorized me to establish peaceful relations by any means necessary. I've done so. The communication ended with reluctant acceptance. Earth would send a full diplomatic delegation to formalize relations with the Thraxian Empire. Kieran's status remained complicated, technically still Earth's representative, but now also consort designate to Queen Ixora. When he returned to the royal chambers, he found Ixora reviewing security protocols with her newly appointed council first, Krell, whose loyalty during the attempted coup had earned him rapid advancement. Earth agrees to formal negotiations, Kieran announced as the young Thraxian excused himself, though they're still processing the personal aspects. Ixora crossed to him, the elegant movements he'd come to cherish now familiar. And you? Are you still processing these aspects as well? I'm adapting, he said with a smile, using the word that had become central to their relationship. Though I admit, I never imagined my diplomatic career would lead to becoming consort to an alien queen. Consort is insufficient terminology. She traced the line of his jaw with cool fingers. The Thraxian term is tsarek, equal partner, co-ruler. The implications weren't lost on him. Your people may not be ready to accept a human in such a role. Some already do, others will adapt. Her compound eyes held his gaze. The real question is whether you are prepared to accept such responsibility, your loyalty to Earth. Remains, he finished, as does my commitment to you to us. Perhaps that's the point, not choosing between worlds but creating a bridge between them. 3 days later, the grand plaza outside the royal palace filled with thousands of Thraxians. On an elevated platform, Kieran stood beside Ixora, both wearing ceremonial attire that blended their cultural traditions, his incorporating elements of her exoskeletal patterns, hers featuring the asymmetrical lines of human formal wear. Before them, representatives from Earth and the Thraxian Council prepared to witness the signing of the first official treaty between their worlds. The document, inscribed on traditional crystal panels as well as digital formats, established not only diplomatic relations but a framework for cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, and mutual defense. As the formal proceedings began, Kieran noticed movement at the plaza's edge. A group of militant faction protesters held signs in Thraxian script: "Purity not pollution, and humans bring weakness." Ixora followed his gaze. "There will always be resistance," she said quietly. "Change frightens those who cannot adapt." "Then we demonstrate the strength in adaptation," he replied. When it came time for the ceremonial sealing of the treaty, tradition called for both leaders to provide genetic material, typically blood for Thraxians, a signature for humans. Kieran, understanding the symbolic importance, stepped forward with a small blade and made a precise cut across his palm. His red blood fell onto the crystal document, mingling with Ixora's iridescent blue ichor. The sight of their combined genetics, alien yet somehow harmonious, silenced the crowd. Even the protesters lowered their signs, momentarily transfixed by the visual representation of two worlds joining. Admiral Frost, representing Earth, completed the ceremony by adding her thumbprint to the digital version. The Interstellar Diplomatic Corps recognizes this treaty and the unique circumstances of its creation. Her eyes met Kieran's with a mix of professional respect and personal uncertainty. Ambassador Vasily will serve as Earth's permanent liaison to the Thraxian court, with expanded authority to represent human interests. It was as close to official blessing as they could expect. Kieran inclined his head in acknowledgement. That evening, a celebration filled the palace's grand hall, the first time humans and Thraxians mingled socially. Musicians from both species attempted collaborative performances, creating strange but not unpleasant harmonies. Culinary experts had prepared foods suitable for both physiologies, though the results caused much amusement on both sides. In a quiet moment, Kieran and Ixora escaped to a balcony overlooking the capital city, where crystalline spires reflected the light of 3 stars now visible in the evening sky, the distant sun of Earth having risen to join the twin stars of the Thraxian system. "Your astronomers tell me that from certain angles our stars form a perfect triangle," Ixora said, her arm around his waist. "A stable formation." "Poetic, isn't it? 3 different stars finding balance together." He looked up at her. "Much like us." She touched her forehead to his, a gesture they'd developed that accommodated their different heights and facial structures. "The private bonding ceremony is tomorrow. Are you nervous?" "Curious," he corrected. "I've studied the traditional rites, but your cultural advisor mentioned there are aspects that can't be translated." Her mandibles clicked in amusement. "Some experiences transcend language, as we've discovered." Later in their chambers, their bodies found the familiar rhythm they'd established, the dance of different biologies finding harmony. His warmth complemented her cool exoskeleton, her strength matched his flexibility. What had once seemed impossible now felt like the most natural connection in the universe. Afterward, as they lay watching the moon's rise, Ixora propped herself on one elbow, studying him with an intensity that still sent shivers through him. "When you first stood in my throne room," she said, "did you imagine this outcome?" Kieran smiled. I was more concerned with immediate survival than long-term romantic prospects. Yet here we are, her voice carried wonder, creating something unprecedented. The best diplomacy creates new possibilities rather than simply negotiating existing ones. He traced the luminescent patterns along her arm. Though I admit, this goes beyond standard diplomatic training. The following day, they stood together in the ancient Temple of Convergence, surrounded only by essential witnesses from both worlds. The private bonding ceremony, simplified to accommodate their different biologies but preserving its essential meaning, joined them in ways both symbolic and concrete. The ritual culminated in the exchange of genetic markers that would be preserved in the Royal Lineage Archive, a scientific process with ceremonial significance. As the temple's crystalline dome captured and refracted light around them, the Thraxian elder pronounced words that the translator rendered imperfectly. What evolution separated, choice reunites. What distance divided, purpose connects. May your union demonstrate that adaptation is not weakness but ultimate strength. When Kieran looked into Ixora's compound eyes, he saw reflected there not an alien queen, but simply the being he had crossed stars to find, different in form but kindred in spirit. Their connection represented hope that diversity could be strength, that difference could create harmony rather than discord. Outside the temple, beyond the palace walls, beyond even the atmosphere of this once hostile world, two civilizations began the cautious process of learning from each other. The path forward would not be simple. Prejudice, misunderstanding, and political maneuvering would challenge them at every turn. But as Kieran and Ixora emerged from the temple as officially bonded partners, the first human Thraxian union in history, they embodied the possibility that the greatest diplomacy comes not from formal negotiations, but from the courage to connect across seemingly insurmountable differences. Under 3 stars and 2 moons, a new dynasty began, not of conquest but of convergence.